Well, welcome, Bridge Builders, to another episode of our podcast, Latter-day Bridge Builders, and we're excited to have with us virtually today Patrick Mason. I'll introduce him in just a second, and we also have our third co-host, Juliet, joining us virtually as well. So
Hi,
I'll
everyone.
be conducting this meeting, and Juliet will naturally be presiding. No, we're excited. We've been looking forward to this discussion today. I guess before I jump in there, please like, comment, subscribe. We love the feedback and the involvement from our community that we're trying to build and getting the word out and expanding these discussions. We feel they are very beneficial, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. So, Patrick, I'll introduce you, and then you can give a rebuttal or add anything that you'd like to. Patrick Mason is a historian at Utah State University, where he holds the Leonard J. Arrington Chair of Mormon History and Culture. He earned his PhD from the University of Notre Dame, served as a Fulbright Scholar, and is a past president of the Mormon History Association. His books have been published by Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, and Deseret Book, covering topics ranging from violence and anti-Mormonism in the 19th century to peace building within the Latter-day Saint tradition. He has also written about belief, doubt, and belonging, questions that sit right at the heart of what we try to do on this show. So thank you for being here. Would you like to say anything more as far as
No, that was
introduction
very
goes?
kind of it. I think the only thing I would say is so like Notre Dame, that's the place in Paris, but I
Notre
was in the
Dame.
Midwest in Indiana, so Notre Dame. That very,
Got
very
it.
definitely. Yeah, it's kind of like Monticello versus Monticello, like you know whether you're in Utah or Virginia,
Sure.
Yep.
right? So,
Buena Vista in Virginia as well, not
exactly.
Buena
Right.
Vista. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, that was
awesome.
great. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you. Thank you for taking time. We know that you're a busy guy and you're doing lots of great work and projects. So let's just jump in, and we're going to go to Juliet first. She is at home taking care of a sick kiddo, and so we want to be sure that we get her comments and questions here, just in case she needs to take off a little early. So, Juliet, get us started. Take it away.
Yes, as the presiding authority in this
Yes.
meeting, I'd be happy to. Well, thank you so much for coming, Patrick. I just finished your book, Restoration, last night.
Mm.
It was a joy to listen to. I watched all many hours of your Mormon Stories episodes last week, re-listened to them, and I
That is
feel
many
like
hours. I mean, I'm surprised you're not still listening. I mean,
I
we might
know,
still be recording. I mean, that thing was
I
so long.
know, honestly. But there's, pros and cons to such long interviews, but you do feel like you get to know a person. And so it was a pleasure to get to know you through the John DeLynn lens, at least. I am just going to jump right in, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
My question is, how does one create space in the church, in your opinion, for people to ask difficult questions without being or feeling infantilized, dismissed, or thought stopped? And this came up because in listening to your interviews, it sounds like when you were in your younger years that you were introduced to a lot of elements of church history, church reality that feel uncomfortable for people in a way, in a space that seemed like it was like pretty comfortable for you. And I would say that my experience was quite different in the sense that I felt like when I brought things up to people, that there was kind of an immediate, like it set off alarm bells in people's heads. And that people kind of just wanted to stop the conversation as soon as they could. So yeah, I guess how do we help more people have an experience that was more like yours and less like mine in that way?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a terrific question. No, I felt very fortunate that my first exposure, as you said, to kind of challenging issues in church history actually came in a BYU class, and under the direction of a really wise and smart professor who wasn't afraid of talking about anything. And not only did I have the class from him, but I worked as his research assistant in the library, and we'd have lots of conversations. And I think he became a kind of model for me. And this is, I think, the first place that I would start in terms of your really good question of how we create space for others and within the church is I think we create space first in our own heads and hearts. That that I felt comfortable because he felt comfortable. And he didn't feel defensive. He wasn't presenting the material in a way that he felt like there always had to be like a caveat or a or something like that
Mhm.
he was I mean he was a really good historian and he was committed to just talking about things the way they are. Now, of course, people can have different interpretations about what happened in the past or motivations of church leaders. We can't read people's minds now or in the past, right? But in terms of what we could know, and then being honest about what we can't know or where there are debates. And he was very settled in that. And that was really important for me. And there was a kind of peaceability about that he had and that I've tried to, that then I gained myself and have tried to take into conversations I've had with other people. And being at peace with hard issues doesn't mean having them settled or resolved or having clean answers. I can be at peace with things in the sense that like I still think things are wrong, right? Or people did bad things that there were serious wrongs that were done. So it doesn't mean that I excuse those things, but when I say that I'm at peace with them is that I don't feel like I always have to be on the defensive all the time. That I can have open and honest conversations. That I can share honestly what I feel and the conclusions that I've reached, and then I can hear other people's questions, concerns, doubts, complaints, rants. Uh, and I don't have to feel personally threatened by them, and I don't have to be on the defensive either for myself or other people. So I think it starts with a kind of inward quality, and I think this is where peace always comes from. There has to be a kind of inner sensibility, and then I've just tried over the years to create spaces wherever I am. Sometimes that's just in my office. Sometimes, with students who want to have conversations. Sometimes that's in my home, with sometimes it's at a lunch table, right? And because so many people feel like there's no one that they can talk to and no place that they can do it within the institutional church. And look, I can't change the big C institutional church. I just don't have that power. I'm not in that position. But what I can do is create spaces around me, socially, in my role here at the university, in my interactions with students, opening, my wife and I opening our home to students to come in and have conversations where it was very clear like that they could talk about anything and say anything, and that was a place where they could do that, and a lot of them said it was the only place where they could do that. So I've just tried really hard to not be defensive, and to create spaces where other people can have the conversations they need to have.
Thank you so much. I love what you said about that it starts internally and being internally at peace. Yeah, I think I know that I had kind of an interesting experience with issues of race in the priesthood when I spent so many years trying to make everything add up in the way that I wanted it to. And then one day I had the thought, maybe the church was just being racist. Like maybe it was just that. And I think that actually brought me a lot of peace. I think this is the kind of peace that you're talking about.
Yes.
Not that I felt good about that, and not that and it did sort of, change my framing of the institution a little bit, but I felt like I wasn't arguing with different ideas, at least within my own mind.
I think that's exactly what I love the way that you talked about it. That was actually really the first issue I wrestled with too, was around race. And some of my very earliest research, beginning as an undergraduate, and one of my very first publications was around, the racial prejudice and discrimination and policies by the church itself, by church members within the state of Utah. And and then I sort of expanded out from there. And there is a piece that comes, I mean, fundamentally for me, and I'll sort of go in a theological direction for just a minute. Fundamentally for me, I'm a Christian. And for me, that means that I place faith in the person and divinity of Jesus, and I believe that Jesus redeems all things, including history and including the church. So I don't need history to be perfect. I don't need the church to be perfect. I don't need prophets to be perfect. I don't need bishops or Relief Society presidents to be perfect, because I have faith that Jesus redeems all things. That doesn't, again, that never excuses sin. But it means I don't need people or institutions to be perfect in order to be redeemable. And that's been a big source of peace for me.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you. Ashton, did you want me to ask my second question, or do you want me to hand it back to you?
Yeah, let's do the second, and then we'll go from there and adjust as we need. But yeah, let's make sure we get to yours.
Okay. This can be answered as specifically or generally as you want, Patrick. But what stands out to you as the thing that faithful, active members of the church get wrong about church history most often? And then the part two is what stands out, the same question, but for people who are maybe critical of the church or critical of church history. What do they get wrong most often in your experience? And like I said, it can be a general concept or just a small little detail.
Yeah, great question. I would say that the answer is the same on both sides. It just goes in different trajectories. And if I were to boil it down to one word, I would say humans. I think faithful Latter-day Saints, where they sometimes get tripped up by church history, is they forget that it's all humans involved, that God isn't down on earth doing this stuff, right? Beginning in 1830 and so forth. People might have visions of God. They might have revelations. They might believe that they talk to God or that God talked to them. But one of my favorite sayings comes from the Catholic Jesuit priest, Father James Martin, who, when he was being initiated as a Jesuit, he was going to live in community with other Jesuits, with other priests. And this older Jesuit kind of pulled him aside, and Father Martin was really excited. He's like, "Okay, show me the ropes. Like, tell me like what I should do. Like, how do I do this? How do I be a good priest?" And the guy said, "Really, there's only 3 rules to living in this religious community. And those 3 rules are: you're not God, this isn't heaven, don't be a jerk." And I think that's pretty good religious advice for all of us. Yeah. That you're not God, this isn't heaven, don't be a jerk. And I think faithful church members, when they look at church history, when they look at the past, they think that they confuse church leaders for God. They confuse the church for heaven. And sometimes we can be jerks about it, right? Church leaders are not God. We don't believe in that. That's not part of our doctrine, even though sometimes we act like it. We don't believe the church is heaven. We believe that it anticipates and looks forward to a more celestial order, but it isn't that now. And so we get really defensive around the humanity and humanness of church history. And this could be on all kinds of things: polygamy, race, gender, go down the list of all the particular things that I think in our effort to cling to our testimonies of the church's truthfulness, that God is somehow working inside the church, we build up all these walls around it that we don't want to admit that sometimes God isn't in everything, and that there's a lot of human agency involved. And as soon as that happens, as fallen creatures, that there's going to be sin involved. And then I think on the other side of the coin, in terms of ex-Mormons, I think sometimes also, I think oftentimes the lens and critique that former members of the church have of the church, they inherited that lens as members of the church, right? It's oftentimes not some kind of foreign set of lenses that they imported from somewhere else. It's the very expectations that they were grown up to have, whether it be about the near perfection or quasi perfection of church leaders, or like they actually believe the songs they sung in primary about like Jesus loving everybody and we should too. And they hold that standard. They hold the church up to a standard that they learned in primary. And when you do that, that's a beautiful standard to have, but inevitably the church and its members and its leaders are going to fall short. And so again, sort of having patience with the very humanness of the institution and its leaders, I think trips people up on both sides.
We've talked before, at least Ashton and I have related on the fact that the book Second Class Saints by Matt Harris,
Yeah.
we both found really healing. And I think it's exactly because of this, because you realize that it's just human beings who are doing usually the best they can, and usually doing a pretty good job and just aren't perfect. And things feel, I don't know if forgivable is the right word, but so much just feels so much more understandable when you look at it that way. And I have to say that what you just described was something that I got wrong. So I think you're exactly right. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Ashton, oh, go ahead.
It's a great book. I love it, and I think it's a great example of this because I think Matt actually brings a lot of. I really admire Matt Harris as a historian. He's so good. He's so careful. Is just a great researcher, great writer, and I think he deals with really tough subjects, but I think he brings generosity and empathy to it. He's not there to point fingers. He's there to be a truth teller. But I don't see him casting a lot of stones in the process.
Yeah, I agree. He's I feel like a really excellent example in that way.
Yeah.
Ashton?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Juliet, for the questions, and thank you both for the comments, and Patrick for your responses. Very, very insightful for me. I'm not sure if we've really introduced, I'm not sure how familiar you are with what we do here. We're the Latter-day Bridge Builders. Mitch and Juliet are both post-Mormon, and I'm active Mormon, an active member. I'm actually an Elders Quorum president right now, so I deal a lot with some of these dynamics of conflicts that come up between us men, bumping against each other and trying to work things out. I'm actually going to steal one of Juliet's questions because I really like it a lot. So I feel like, okay, from my side of coming into a space like this and seeing some of these human things, here's the question. What are your thoughts on activism within the church? We have been officially warned against it from the pulpit, but activism has had an important role in shaping what the church is today. And I think for me, just to tag on a little bit to this question, I've been taught my whole life to be active in the church. And I guess the irony that strikes me recently is that activism is disallowed, but being active is the standard and the expectation for all of us as members.
That's a great question. So when I was at Notre Dame, I got a master's degree in peace studies, I didn't know there was such a thing as peace studies and until I got there and learned about it and then I got a master's degree in it. And one of the things we talked about all the time was something that we call theory of change. What's your theory of change? And there's not just one theory of change. There are many theories of change, and each individual person, each individual movement or group needs to discern what their theory of change is. And if so, your theory of change might be top down, right? You think that, for instance, if you're talking about American politics, you need to target, the U.S. government, so the Congress and the president pass laws that address the issue you care about. Or maybe you will even bottom up, right? You're not so focused on Washington, D.C., and you're really going to focus on, sort of grassroots networks and, educating the public and so forth. And those are just two examples. There's lots of different theories of change. And for me, that's how I approach this question of activism within the church, of what is your theory of change? I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer, because we can absolutely, as we look at the past, as we look at the present, we see that people have moved the needle within the church by employing lots of different theories of change. Some people have moved the needle by saying, I am going to be a public activist. I'm going to start a movement. I'm going to do things that sort of mimic other kinds of public movements and social movements. I'm going to work on raising, awareness raising, bringing attention to a topic, and using the media and doing all these kinds of things. And I'm going to focus on that. And we can point to examples where that has been effective, where it has moved the needle. We can also point to examples where it's been effective as a movement, but the organizers paid a personal cost, sometimes in terms of their own church membership. Now, that's all part of the theory of change, right? What is the cost that you're willing to bear? What kind of change do you want to see? And what are, any kind of change is going to require some kind of cost, right? Blood, sweat, and tears, and identity, maybe friendships, maybe memberships, other kinds of things. Other people have said, both prudentially, in the sense that, like, I don't want my church membership to be threatened, and I believe strategically, and I think there's some good examples of this as well, that actually, like, public pressure on the church in the way that, like, a social movement would normally work, that actually the church doesn't work like American politics and civil society, that the church has kind of its own logic. And so I'm not going to start a big movement where I, recruit the media and make a big public issue of stuff and sort of in some ways embarrass the church about some of its shortcomings publicly. Or at least raise the issues. Whether the church is embarrassed or not is then a different question. But instead, I'm going to work privately within whatever spheres of influence I have, and that could be in lots of different ways. The way that works. So I could give you examples on all those sides of people who have made different decisions in terms of what is their theory of change, of how they want to move the needle within the church, and I could show you examples of ineffective examples on all those sides, and examples of effective examples. Now, is there? What I can't give you is the grand unified theory of why some things are effective sometimes and why some things aren't. I mean, this is true for all sort of movements, right? Why did the civil rights movement work in the 1960s but not earlier? I mean, we can sort of theorize some of these kinds of things, but that's why it's sometimes hard to know, especially in the moment. So all I can say on the question of activism, I encourage people just to be really thoughtful about it. And to maybe do some research into the history and strategy and theory of nonviolent movements. As I look at some movements or some actors, even in my lifetime or in the last few years, where some have been effective or some have less, especially the ones that I think have been less effective, I'm like, I wish they had just learned a little bit more, done a little more studying on the way that social movements work, or what makes an effective social movement, or what makes for effective nonviolent social change. Because I think there were a couple mistakes that were made that they could have avoided. But of course, when you're so passionate about issues, sometimes it's like, oh, it's not time to go get your graduate degree in peace studies. I got to move, right? I got to do this. So just my only advice to people is just be really intentional about their theory of change. And it's not for me or anybody else to tell you what the right theory of change is, but just know that Every theory of change has its own costs. So I will say myself, I'll just admit, my theory of change, I'm more of an institutionalist. I'm more of a gradualist. Um, and so, and there are in terms of when I do things within the church, and there are reasons for that. We could be here all day, and but there's reason. I've thought about this a lot, and I've come to that conclusion. Part of it is my own temperament and the way I'm situated and other kinds of things. But I've also decided that's just where my skills are and where I can be most effective in terms of my own theory of change. But there's a cost to being a gradualist, because there are real needs right now. There's real hurt, there is real pain, there is real suffering. And if you are a gradualist, and if you say, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work within the institution, I'm going to work with the institution, it means that you're looking at medium to long-term change. And in the short term, people are going to suffer because the change doesn't come fast enough. And that's what I have to live with. Whereas on the other side, for people who are more immediatist, people who are more like, now, it's got to happen now, sometimes the cost on the other side is actually you can cause an institution to retrench and to buckle down. And actually, as much as you care about the needs and the suffering and the pain that's happening right now, you might actually, and we have cases of this, actually set back some sense of institutional progress, right? The people that you care about the most, you're not going to be able to help because the institution. So again, there's no right answer, but people just have to be thoughtful and just know that there's going to be costs on either side, and like, what are the costs you're willing to bear?
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights. I'm considering as you're sharing these things, like, I don't know what type of person I am yet. Like I'm kind of in the discovery phase. I'm kind of new at this point, and I think of like the stories of Jesus. He kind of was an immediatist in some ways, and the cost was great as far as his life. And maybe the answer isn't the same for the needs. I know you mentioned the backfire effect as well. It's like, wow, I have, when I've been an immediatist in my approach to things, it's been backfiring as far as in a relationship between myself and others, or even within larger groups. I love what you said, just thinking back, that you'd mentioned private versus public. And I think the magic really does happen in private conversations, because you can respond to a person immediately and get the feedback from them instead of just guesswork and entire internal passion being the motivating force forward, instead of getting those responses and trying to build something collaborative with someone else. So thank you so much. Jules, I want to go back to you, see if you had any responses, since this was your question.
Oh, no, I'm just realizing that I'm an immediatist down to my bones. And that gets me into trouble. And I think also has been impactful in ways that I just can't stop thinking about MLK's quote about the white moderate.
That's right.
And the negative piece of the absence of tension versus the positive piece of the presence of justice. And I think that is sort of like the quote that I don't want to say lived my life by, but ideologically I've really held up for the last few years. But I feel like you've given me a lot to think about in relation to that. So.
I think you're exactly right, Julia, in the sense, I mean, Letter from Birmingham Jail, I mean, I think it's one of the most prophetic things ever written in American history. I come back to it all the time. I teach it as often as I can. And for me, again, as a gradualist, as an institutionalist, that's what I have to reckon with. Am I actually doing things to work for greater peace, for greater justice, for the coming of what I believe is the kingdom of God, with all of that, or am I just not doing anything, right? And calling it gradualism, right? And so yeah, it's that has to be, I think, the prophetic refrain in the ears and in the minds of people like me. Am I like the white moderate that the king rightly calls out in that letter?
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Mitch, do you have any thoughts?
I think that when I created this podcast several years ago, the idea behind it was more of a, now that I have words to describe it, thanks to you, Patrick, gradual and grassroots. Kind of where I kind of came with this is like, I'm just some guy, like, but I see in my own experience leaving the church, like I wish things maybe had gone differently, both the way I acted and the way that others acted towards me and so forth. And I thought that just having conversations would be the best way to promote that. And if it could be recorded and other people could at least listen in, I think that would be at least noble. So just wanted to share that with people. So it's kind of cool that we have a good mix among us of these kind of things. And people have asked me, like, have I achieved my goal with this podcast and so forth? And I'm like, well, right now my only goal is that it pays for itself. So if you could please donate, listener, we would appreciate that. But I just don't think I really have a goal per se, because I think it is just like the conversations that are therapeutic for myself, and I hope are that way for other people as well. And so the goal is the journey, I guess, for me. And as long as I can keep going, I'll keep doing it. But anyways.
I like that.
Yeah.
The goal is the journey.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to jump into one of your...
Yeah. Yeah, I had a question for you, Patrick. Just kind of when a believer, or this doesn't even need to be within like a Mormon context per se, but when you have like two differing beliefs of two individuals who are usually pretty close to each other, family members, friends, so forth, it can be very difficult, I think, for one person to state their side and not feel judged and or dismissed, put in your term there, but and I think that kind of goes both ways, right? So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on how people could be able to hold their own convictions and be able to hold them firmly, but also be able to show that empathy, be able to show that love, and not feel like they're being judged for their position, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the key elements, one of the first steps of effective peace building, bridge building, whatever you want to call it. When we teach this, we have a peace building program here at Utah State, and when we teach this, one of the things we oftentimes, it's one of the first steps we teach our students is not to confuse people with positions, and to see people as people. There's different ways to articulate this, but that as human beings, we all hold lots of different positions. We hold positions in terms of the way that we identify ourselves, right? I'm a dad, a husband, a professor, an author, a Mormon. All the kinds of things that I am, and all those things are true. And on any given day, at any given moment, you would see me performing some of those, one or more of those roles, but none of those things is me. None of those things on their own. It tells you everything you need to know about me. And the times when I feel frustrated or hurt or misunderstood is when people reduce me to one of the things that I am. Now, it's sometimes they reduce me to something that I'm not, right? That's, like, no, that really isn't me. But sometimes they reduce me to something that I am. It's just not all of me. And so they're not seeing me. They're seeing part of me, or a position, or a role, or an identity. And none of us like to be reduced to some part of ourselves. And so I have to, when I'm in conflict, in tension with somebody else, the first thing I have to do is like, am I reducing them to a position? Am I confusing people with positions? and or am I seeing them as a person? Am I seeing the people as people, recognizing that, and so giving them the grace of that this is one part of them. What they just said, what they just did, is not the entirety of them. That even it is the tip of an iceberg, even if I see it truly, right? They really did say that, or right, they really do believe that, right? It's a tip of an iceberg, actually a whole mountain range that's underwater, right? It's part of an ecosystem of all of the different experiences and conversations and identities, all the things that make them a wonderful, illustrious, complex human being. What I just saw was just a tip of that. And so at my best, then that leads me into curiosity. Because I'm not assuming that that position that they just took or inhabited is the entirety of them. Now I have to ask some questions about why they said that, what's behind that, what motivates that, how did they come to that, and recognizing and giving them space that they might even have some internal disagreement around that too. Sometimes I say things and I only believe it like 80%, right? That there's some part of me, but I can only say one word at a time, right? I don't have two mouths, and so I think all of those different kinds of things. It's patience, it's curiosity, it's empathy, as you said, but that's grounded in seeing people or trying to see them in their complexity, and even if we can't see all of that, just knowing that there's complexity there, that there's layers that might be invisible to us.
That's great insight. I think in today's culture, at least in the online space, we see clips, we see, people's whole persona is maybe boiled down to their passion project or whatever it might be. And so it's easy to dismiss and not see them as the whole, even if we're just seeing that tip of the iceberg. That is even true in that case. I have one last question, then I'll turn it back over to Ashton. But I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit more about your experience going on Mormon Stories several years ago. And because for me, that was about the time that I started this with my previous co-host, this podcast. And I just kind of saw that as like the textbook example of what could be perceived at least as two completely opposite sides of people, or a position, I guess, you versus John DeLynn versus.
Yeah.
And I think you both stated your positions very clearly. You both still showed that empathy and like expressions and so forth. And I was just curious maybe what you learned from that experience and what the fallout for better and worse has been since that time, if any.
Yeah. Great question. It's just interesting. Like right before this, I was on a call with John.
Oh, really?
Cool. Yeah, talking about other stuff, and we've maintained a friendship and a relationship since then. And going into that, we did have a relationship. We had done an online writing project back when like blogs were all the thing. There was no such thing as podcasts yet. So there's like the Paleolithic age or something like that. So we had done a blog project together, and there were some good things about that, but it also ended like not super great. We had a relationship, but not a friendship, and because of our positions, and I think we were both trying to resist this, but it's hard to resist. That sometimes we didn't fully trust the other person because we reduced them to position, right? And we thought that sometimes things they said or that the other person said or did came out of, this set of, loyalties or identities or other things that we were both making lots of assumptions about, right? And so we did have a previous track record, and then we'd had some other interactions, some better than others. But he had invited me to come on, and I'd kind of put him off for a while, and I wasn't sure, and I genuinely, like, there are not very many times, I'm not a very mystical person, like God doesn't talk to me very often, but I genuinely felt that the Holy Spirit told me to go on Mormon Stories. And the Spirit doesn't tell me very many things, honestly. So I was like, really? That? And I told a lot of the people that, friends and family members, and most of them thought it was a really bad idea. But I couldn't deny, just this sense that it was something I should do. And so, um, the whole, I live in Logan. We were recording in Salt Lake, so it was an hour and a half drive, and the whole way down, I was just like praying the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. And because I didn't know how it was going to go. I mean, John gave me lots of assurances, and I wanted to trust him. But again, we had a fraught relationship. But I think what made that conversation work is that we both tried to bring the very best of ourselves. We tried to bring a lot of authenticity and honesty. So we were going to fully represent what we believed and what we thought in that moment. So we were going to be honest with each other. We were going to try to listen and to be generous towards the other person. We were going to allow for disagreement. We were going to allow for the fact that we just occupy different spaces. And the thing that hit me, and I count this as really one of the great graces in my life in recent years, is that I was sitting there in that studio with John and Margie. It was just so abundantly clear that God loves John and Margie DeLynn. And I got like a taste of the pain that they've carried for many years, both their own and other people's. And once you get a sense of that, I mean, maybe there's nothing more human about us than our pain and our suffering. And when you get a sense of somebody else's pain and suffering, that's, I think, when you get a sense of their humanity. And so, and I think John and Margie very much reciprocated. And so we weren't there like as a bundle of positions having a debate. We were there as a little group of humans having a conversation. And that made all the difference. And so that, because of that, it did, a fraught relationship turned into a friendship. And we've tried to do some things since. Some have worked, some haven't. And that's okay. Not every project is going to work. Sometimes the timing isn't always right. But what has been resilient is the friendship, because we see each other as brothers and sisters, like genuinely. Yeah. So I love John. I love Margie. And yeah, we disagree about some church stuff, but okay, and so that to me was the greatest takeaway. And I think from the responses that we've had, and people have just been overwhelmingly kind and generous in their responses, I think that's what came through. Again, we said a lot of things, there were a lot of positions, there were a lot of statements made about different things, but I think far more than any of like the propositional things we talked about, it was a sense of like, what is it like when two people who clearly just land in different places on some of these like really important questions, but they can come together and have and see each other with dignity and respect and trust and love. And I think in our day and age, I think a lot of people had sort of given up and wasn't even sure that was possible anymore. So that's why I love what you all are doing too, is because I see that very much of the spirit that you're bringing here.
Well, thank you. It's definitely the goal. And yeah, just at least here in Utah, the church is so interwoven with the culture, and everybody has a tie to it in some way or shape or form, so I just would love to see us kind of come together more to not get past our issues, because I think the issues that we have are important and significant for the most part, but still be able to see the human on the other side of that debate, that other argument, and so forth. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I just want to check in with Juliet. I can't see you, so I don't know if you have any comments. If you can't raise your hand, I wouldn't see you. My phone's on silent, so I couldn't get your text even if you sent it.
Oh, well, we're good. Just over here breastfeeding. We're good.
Fair enough. I have just a comment that hopefully we'll kind of transition into my next question. I've been listening to When the Heart Waits by Sue Monk Kid, just by audio. And something that's just stuck in my brain since hearing some of that, she creates this paradigm shift, I guess, path or journey that you could say, where we naturally start with a they mentality, like almost tribalism, pointing at the dangers outside of my position, right? And then she says that it transitions into almost an I position, which is like that introspective, where do I stand? Who am I? And then she says, hopefully we can transition into a we mentality, that there's not the they, there's not the I, it's all of we, but we have to know the I position before we can transition to the we. And I think that was just very insightful to me, and that really has helped me in my approach with other people, is seeing all of us as part of all of us, and not a they, and not an I or you, but a we. So thank you for sharing. Thanks for the question. I love hearing the background, like just the experiences of people who, and how they experience the spirit or promptings or the direction in their life that we could call divine, or just what drives us forward in meaningful ways, because they are so different for different people. I've heard all sorts of, like, it was so clear, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And that's not my experience. My experience has been very much seeking for clarity and not finding it very easily. But my next question, in some ways it relates to these topics and this experience that you had with John, but more in a principle or institution sort of sense, in the institutions of religion and science. They have, both of these institutions have almost been set up as like diametrically opposed, at least for me in my experience and in my life. So my question is, how do we bridge the gap between science and religion so they aren't seen as competitive or mutually exclusive, but rather as collaborative and complementary to each other?
It's a great question. So maybe this is because I'm a historian, I'm a humanist, but I think most of what we do as humans is we inhabit and we tell stories about ourselves and the world. And I think the idea of religion and science being sort of inextricably in conflict with one another, that's a story that we've told. It's actually a pretty foundational story in modernity. Over time, I've largely come to see it as a false story, and when people tell that story, there are interests on both sides. It's a story that's oftentimes propagated by people who are deeply invested in one of those knowledge communities or the other, and who in some way feel threatened by the very real insights that the other knowledge community has, but they want to like shore up the authority of their own side. And so the way that they do that is by creating a either or dynamic. And we do this in lots of, Democrats and Republicans do this. This is, it's a very human thing for us to have a kind of either or mentality rather than a both and. And so but then sometimes I hear people like swing the pendulum like totally the other way. It's like, oh, like religion and science are basically the same thing. Like true religion and true science are basically the same thing. I'm like, they seem kind of different, right? In some pretty important ways. I've just become more and more comfortable with the fact that they are different knowledge communities. They're different ways of knowing. They're different ways of being human. That both have tremendous and powerful insights into the world that we live in and what it means to be human. It would almost be like saying, which is better, like baseball or rock and roll? Like, well, they do different things. Like they're both like, and or sometimes I mean I work at a university, and sometimes people are like, well, which is more important, like art and poetry or engineering and science? I'm like, well, all of the above. I don't really want to walk on an airplane that was built by poets, but I also don't want engineers to try to explain like the human heart and the human psyche,
Yeah.
right? So we all have our different methods. We all have our different questions and our different areas of expertise, our different domains of knowledge. And so I don't want to minimize the very real differences in the kinds of questions and answers and methods that religion and science have. But I see that as a beautiful thing, because they are trying to unlock different aspects of the human person, the natural world, the cosmos that we inhabit. So I'm a kind of all of the above type guy.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, like maybe for our active audience, well, everybody, I think it applies as far as principles go, but we speak in terms like the body of Christ. If the hand says to the eye, I can't remember exactly which parts to what, but it's like, I don't have need for you, and we do have need for the whole body. And I think of it in those terms between science and religion, when they seem to be put in opposition to each other. It's like they are separate things, but they're inseparable. And they can push the other to be better even, is my view. What I've run into is when I maybe take an approach that's more leaning towards the religious side, then I've heard the pushback like, well, you're not being intelligent about this. You're not being reasonable about this. And when I take it from a science side, it's like, you're having doubts. You're not being faithful enough about this. And so I've just found myself kind of stuck between here, but I feel like I fall in, at this point in my journey and my development, kind of like I want both of them. They both serve for my development and growth and my fulfillment in life. And it's hard to pick a favorite when both are favorites, right? And they're both essential in so many ways. We don't have to pick favorites when it comes to things that are essential. It's like, do we choose air or do we choose food? We need them both, right? Mm-hmm. We're coming close on our time. I wanted to bring in one aspect, at least for me, that has been a really difficult thing in my life, throughout my life, but also recently. And it's from Brene Brown and her book, Braving the Wilderness. She talks a lot about belonging. And just from my personal experience, I have always been hoping to find a place that I belong, and just having that need, I guess. And I haven't really found that, and it's been really devastating at different times in my life. And she said something, though, as far as belonging. And this is just my memories, just a paraphrase of kind of the message that came across to me. When you don't belong anywhere, you belong everywhere. And then I got thinking about, well, I love Jesus. I love the teachings of Jesus. He really didn't belong in the Jewish church. Like, he didn't fit in very well. He wasn't accepted there. But he kind of belonged anywhere. Like, he went everywhere, like all over the place. He didn't just stay in one location. He did the Decapolis. I don't know. I couldn't list geographically all of the places, but he went to all sorts of different cities. Samaria and connected with all of the different types of people there and cultures. And that, I mean, we talk about the wilderness in spiritual terms, like especially with the Book of Mormon, and they went into the wilderness. They left the safety of the city. And I guess I don't really have a question here, but how do you brave the wilderness when it comes to kind of being in this muddy middle and, this wilderness where people are criticizing you from all sides because you don't really fit into any one category or one position?
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom in that question. I'm going to go back to what you mentioned earlier in terms of the body of Christ. I think that's one of the great passages and great metaphors in all of Scripture. And as I've gotten older, I think I've come to appreciate that the real wisdom in that metaphor even more. That it's okay for me to be an eye or a hand, or whatever. I don't have to be the whole body. And I can try to be the best eye that I can be, and bring all of that to the community. But that means I have to let other people be a hand, or I have to let other people be a liver, or something like that. And that includes this question that you're talking about. So I am, I think, as you were suggesting you are, I'm a spiritually curious person. I read, frankly, as much and sometimes even more from other religious traditions than I do from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in terms of, if you looked at like the book that I'm reading at any given time, it's probably by a non-Latter-day Saint author. If you were able to drill into my brain and like take out a sample and like what's all the stuff that makes up like Patrick Mason's like religious worldview, you'd find an awful lot of non-Latter-day Saint stuff that I've picked up around the world from Muslims and atheists and Hindus and Jews and everybody else. And that feeds my soul. I like that kind of wandering. And I'm comfortable with other people who like having those kinds of conversations too. And at the same time, I go to church with a lot of people who aren't wired that way. And almost their entire religious and spiritual universe is encompassed within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? They read all the conference talks, and they read every book that Deseret Book publishes, right? And every new general authority book, and they listen to all the LDS podcasts, and that is their spiritual and religious universe. I can't say to them that my way is better. I hope, in my interactions with them, that they see that I'm bringing something to the table too, in a way that maybe they don't quite get, or like, why not just read another conference talk, But then I'll say something in conversation or in Sunday school, and they're like, "Oh, I've never quite thought of it that way." And then there's a kind of mutual appreciation. So I have to appreciate like the deep rootedness of some people who have like settled on one plot of land, and they're going to drill that well, and they're going to drill deep, and they're going to get living water from that well. Whereas I'm going to do that, but I'm going to draw from lots of different wells in lots of different places. I keep coming back to this one, right? I feel very much connected to this one place and this one people. But I like going out and wandering a little bit. And so I hope that we can just appreciate the gifts that we each bring. I don't feel like, so I don't feel guilty for not being, the way that somebody else is. It's just a different set of gifts, a different set of temperament that I have. And so I find belonging in my own way. I'm glad that other people find belonging in their way. And I hope we can all, uplift each other.
Yes. Thank you so much. We could probably close in Jesus' name, right? No, that was amazing. I love the visual of the wells and sharing water from from others' wells as well. Also, well, our time is up. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Yep, your time, your thoughtfulness, the insights that I think each of us, I mean, we're all in different places at different places on our individual paths. And I think it's helpful for each of us, and hopefully the audience feels that as well. So just, I guess I didn't think of how to close this besides, we'd love to continue conversations like these. If you're a viewer and you'd like to share some insight and enter the space of bridge building, we love that. And we brainstorm with Juliet frequently of different guests that we could have on as well. So, and I guess the reminder, like, comment, and share that the message can spread a little further. So again, thank you, Patrick. Any final thoughts from you, and we'll sign off.
No, thanks. This is just, I love the project. I love what you're doing. I love the space that you're creating for people to do this. Heaven knows we need more of this in the world today. So thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.